All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there, just like you right there, just like me right here. All right, here's Elliott. This is their album called Butterfly. No, it's not like a Firefall thing. I know it kind of looks like it, right? This is like Def Leppard and Whitesnake. I'm going to be talking about Joe Elliott today, so I figured this would be a good album to showcase. Had these guys on the show. They're smart, they're funny, they're from Sweden, of course. Everybody's from Sweden except for me, all right? At least everybody who plays decent melodic rock these days. A lot of bands from Sweden that are really good. So Joe Elliott has said the quiet part out loud. He says, new bands aren't getting the chance to hit it big. Oh, man. I've been saying this for I don't know, since I started the channel. I'm like, hey, I'm listening to some new music. How come this isn't on the radio? And I keep saying it over and over again, and people are like, Dave, there is no radio. Just download or go to Spotify and just do what you got to do. Make your own playlists. It's better. That way you don't get DJs, interrupting. DJs telling you what you just heard. They don't do that anymore. They tell you about the yard sale and the, what's going on at the Kiwanis Club or something, but they don't back sell or tell you the music that you're listening to, of course, because it's self-evident. Now listen to what Joe Elliott has to say here. Nowadays, he said, kids just shove their headphones on, not talking to their parents or their mates, which is why I think playing live has become very important because people have to rub shoulders. And he's talking about the old geezers like me. Now, I don't know if I want to rub anyone's shoulders. I think that's probably not a thing to do based on the protocols. When you get to the stadium, they may even say in the UK that you're not allowed to rub shoulders. I know it's a figure of speech. But while some people think rock is dead, this is the article again here, Def Leppard's Joe Elliott isn't one of them, although he does think it's much harder for bands these days. He says some of these new bands write great songs, and they're going about it the right way, but they aren't getting the chance, he says. I don't think it's their fault. And that's a bit scary. He says the industry has changed, which is making it more difficult for new rock bands to get noticed. You think? All right, so again, Joe Elliott, you could do your part, brother. I think, next year, probably a big tour. This summer, probably a big tour. Is Def Leppard, Motley Crue this year? Man, Def Leppard, I guess that's a good idea for Def Leppard because by the time you get through with Motley Crue, you're going to be like, wow, Def Leppard, they're playing all their instruments. They're singing these songs live. Yeah, they might get some help, with the keyboards or beefing up some of the older songs to make it sound fuller, but I'm thinking Joe is still singing it live, and I think they're still a really good band to see. This is something really important, though, he says. Even scarier is that Def Leppard started in 1977, and we're still talking about us in 2023. Are we going to be talking about these newer bands in 2065? He did the math really quickly there. Look, these formats are in a holding pattern. I said this in a video a while ago. It's like if I hear a song from 1970 on a soft rock station, that song is 53 years old. And I'm like, wow. And they're still playing it like it came out 10 years ago. Anything from the 70s, it's really old. Anything from the 80s is getting to be really old, which makes me feel really old. Even the 90s, I have to do the math. I'm like, oh, so 30 years ago was 1993, not 20 years ago. I'm like, whoa, that song's 30 years old or 31 or 32 years old. I did a playlist for 1991 and, sent it to my patrons so they could listen to it. And people were like, wow, because it's a year which was forgotten about because it's not the 80s. So you can't put it in the 80s show, the 80s radio station, right? And it doesn't sound like the 90s for the most part for the rest of the decade. It's like the redheaded stepchild of the decade, 1991. You could put obviously 1990, 91, and a portion of 92 in there. And then when you get to 93, things are really starting to just go south. At that point, you just know, this is, at that moment, this is why I started listening to country music. And you found a lot of producers and writers went from the world of rock and pop over to country because they didn't want to be in that situation where number one, they probably weren't in demand as a writer because the writing changed so drastically. You had a lot of whiny female singers who were lying naked on the floor, contemplating their existence, and they didn't know what to do. And it just became like this real bummer, this real Debbie Downer decade of angst and depression, where the 80s was one big party. We went from nothing but a good time to Torn, and that's kind of what we did. And again, my theory is, okay, how come all of the music couldn't still coexist? You know why? Because you would have put this whiny negative stuff up against the happy, partying, feel-good music, and the feel-good would have destroyed it. It's like a populist versus a crazy woke liberal. That's what you're dealing with. I mean, the music of the 80s was the greatest form of populism. The music of the 90s to me represented a change, sort of a depressing, inward, woe is me, I can't make it, the world is really bad, and nobody wants to listen to that all the time. Yeah, there was some good music in the 90s, and I've come to like some of it more than I used to because it was still organic. That's why. I don't think it can hold up to the music that came before it because it's not melodic. It's written in minor keys. It has a weird cadence at times. It feels edgy, but yet it's cheesy in its edginess to some degree because it's trying really hard to be, counterintuitive to the prior decade. So anyway, that's my cutting edge analysis, right? But Joe Elliott just hits the nail on the head better. He says here, some of these new bands write great songs and they're going about it the right way, but they aren't getting the chance. He says, I don't think it's their fault. And that's the scary bit. He adds, even scarier is that Def Leppard started in 1977. And we're still talking about us in 2023. Are we still going to be talking about these newer bands in 2065? Probably not. And then, of course, they go on to do a little cut and paste, talking about Def Leppard. They're getting ready to release their new album, Drastic Symphonies, on May 19th. They'll be at the Royal Festival Hall in London. And will anybody play anything off of their new album, Drastic Symphonies, on May 19th, even though they are Def Leppard, just like the Journey album that came out? Nobody played anything off of that. Oh, and the prior Def Leppard album, which was really good, I thought. I mean, the band loved it, and nobody touched it here in the United States. No classic rock stations, no regular rock stations played it. So maybe they'll get some airplay over in the UK briefly. That's probably what's going to happen. But they talk about how they're touring, and they kick off their tour on May the 22nd with Motley Crue, the UK and European leg of the stadium tour. It's good to be Def Leppard because you're the best band by a long shot on that particular double bill with Motley Crue, especially with what has been going on with Crue and Mick Mars and all that stuff. Yeah, I've seen Def Leppard. They're fantastic. They're not faking it. They're bringing it live, and I'm pretty sure Joe Elliott wouldn't have it any other way. But again, Joe Elliott says the quiet part out loud. New bands, they're not getting a fair shake. I try. People thank me, but then other people say, will you stop doing that intro where you're talking about some unknown band that nobody cares about? I'm like, okay, sure. I'll be glad. Because then if I stop, then who else is going to do it, right? I'm going to keep doing it, folks. I'm just letting you know. I mean, I kind of waffled a little bit thinking maybe I should stop, but I listened to, there's stuff that I've heard. There's stuff that I have downloaded into my collection that nobody has heard yet. And there's some really great music out there. And I'll be talking about it in the future. So again, I apologize to all those folks that just want the gossip and the rumors and all that stuff. Hey, it's still going to be out there, but new music is really important to me. So I guess I find it part of my mission here on this particular channel. All right. Thanks again, folks, for watching this channel, and I will see you soon.